decides to turn blue. Oh, there it is. Click.
I just sent it out on Twitter, where people are still yelling at me about how Democrats should be better at building coalitions.
And we're live. It is Monday. That's President's Day to you. February 15th, 2021, 5 o'clock p.m. And, this is the day that that Donald Trump officially became a former president. Because the impeachment is now over, so this is the day he became an ex-president. That's the Van Jones in me speaking. I guess it's not very compelling.
No, no one's buying it.
We're not allowed to have fun anymore, but things are a little bit more fun today than they were last week, because the impeachment trial was kind of a downer. And we have Tom Nichols here to talk about it. How did you like the impeachment trial, Tom Nichols?
It made me sick.
In what
I
way,
wrote about it
specifically? Like in the stomach? In the head?
Well, I wrote a piece yesterday for USA Today where I said that, and this will answer Kate's question obliquely, I suppose, that the Republicans who voted to acquit have smeared that vote on their records the same way people smeared excrement on the walls of the Congress.
Nice.
Except that you can wash off excrement.
But why? What did you make of Mitch McConnell's speech? I thought this was the most interesting thing in the whole, this voting to acquit and then giving a speech acknowledging all the facts that would be required to convict. How do you, given that he has no element of morality or anything other than political calculation, how do you understand the political calculation that he's made here?
I'm going to give a shout out to Jonathan Last, who is always my spirit animal on being the most pessimistic human in the world. I mean, let's apply Occam's razor, because I agree with Jonathan. Let's apply Occam's razor here. We know that Mitch McConnell doesn't give a rat's ass about principle of any kind other than power. So why would Mitch McConnell do this? Because clearly there is an instrumental reason. And I think that instrumental reason first is reassuring the donors, right? Oh, I know it was all crazy, but we're back to being the normal Republicans now. You can trust us. We're getting rid of Trump. This was what I was waiting for. I am not. That was also Mitch's way of saying, I am not Lindsey Graham. That's Mitch saying, I ain't no band leader. Like in The Godfather. I think it's also just this incredible bottomless cynicism that says, I know that the Republican base is as stupid as the day is long, and that we can put out completely contrary statements at any given moment, cherry pick them later, and then do kind of a biblical exegesis backward to say this was always our position. You're seeing it happen already. The people that argue with me, the few conservative friends I have left. Well, Trump said a peaceful demonstration, and McConnell criticized him and said it got out of hand, and on and on and on. Like you see this with people like Nancy Mace and I'm trying to think. There was another member of Congress who put out two completely contradictory statements within days of each other. It's because they know their base is stupid, and the base will only remember the last thing they hear. I'm gonna digress for one moment. That every time I see somebody like Mitch do this, it reminds me of when I was in a focus group once, but for an ad, right? And there were it was like men 18 to 35 kind of demo, right? It was about a rock station. They showed us an ad that was clearly about sex, and kind of luridly, leering, winking at the camera.
Was it just like a Rorschach block, and you were just like, this is about sex, it must be?
I said, I'm sorry, are we supposed to grasp at the meaning here of this ad, And it was about masturbation of all things. That's a story for another day. But they end this with Rock 101 plays the best rock. And they went around the table. What did you think this was about? Well, it's about being 11 years old and, listening to the Who in your room, while you're doing it. And they got to the one guy who went, they said, what was the message you took away from the set? And he went, Rock 101 plays the best music 24/7. That is the base. That is exactly the guy that Mitch and the Republicans play to. The guy that just takes that top line message, has no ability to discern, anything that happened before it, can't read into the message. And then if Mitch comes out and says, what Donald Trump did was wrong, that guy goes home and says, Mitch McConnell said Donald Trump was wrong. And so, the Republicans have really cleaned up their house. And now I can go back to voting. It is amazing levels of cynicism at work. But I also think that was Mitch, just to put a bow on this, that was also Mitch turning to the frightened normals in the suburbs and the Republican donors saying, we know he was terrible, but you understand we had to acquit him to get on with obstructing Joe Biden.
And how do you game out the probability of this working? I
define working.
Well, so, Lindsey Graham says the future of the Republican Party is Laura Trump, who's going to replace Richard Burr in the Senate. And Mitch McConnell is clearly hoping that is not true. And Bill Cassidy is saying the future of the Republican Party is the same ideas we've always had, as though the last few years have been driven by ideas. It seems like we are now here for the battle royale within the party, only with the folks like you no longer in the party to be part of it. So is this the part where they expel all the Bill Cassidys and Liz Cheneys? Is it the part where the Mitch McConnells kind of like, all right, the adults are back now, get back into your crazy closet? Or is this a messy coalition that stays together because it hates libs more than it hates each other?
Yes, that last one. This is not going to be some kind of big this is what I was hoping for and why I stayed. I actually came back into the party after kind of, wandering off during the 2012. I called it my trial separation in 2012. And I didn't make it a divorce. I actually came back into the party to say somebody has to fight for centrism. But I don't think there's going to be any big clarifying Donnybrook here. First, let's take Lindsey Graham out of this equation. For years, I have been willing. I always wondered, does somebody have something on Lindsey Graham? But then I said, okay, the people who've described Lindsey Graham as just the most eager remora attached to the belly of any shark. Okay, I could buy that. But I'm sorry. I have this is purely my gut speculation.
Like a lot of people right now, though.
Well, it's my gut speculation is when you are kissing Laura Trump's ass, to me that says, dear Trump,
remoras have more self-respect.
Well, right, there are things rats won't do, right? Like the old joke goes. So when you're kissing Laura Trump's ass, what I hear is, please, 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 Trump family, I've done everything you've asked and been loyal. Please don't use whatever it is that I'm so afraid of. Because there's no other, at this point, there is no other explanation. There's nobody, even in South Carolina, that loves the Trump family so much that Lindsey Graham needs to kiss Laura Trump's ass. It's just not there. But with the other Republicans, I think this is going to be a coalition of saying, look, what are we in business for? We're in business to keep a lot of rubes angry enough to let the rest of us keep passing economically advantageous legislation for the wealthiest of us. And nobody's going to upset. Like, we've been through this once already. I mean, we saw this with Mitch versus the Tea Party in 2010. So anybody who's kind of costing them real power, I mean, they may be able to eventually walk on Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert. They're not going to walk on Lindsey Graham. They're not going to walk away from Ted Cruz or Josh Hawley, because in the end, they know that after all is said and done, they can walk in and they can take a piece of legislation. They'll take this big pile of stuff in the tax code that nobody understands. They're going to say, Josh, just sign this because you know what you're supposed to do as a Republican. And he'll go right. Because as I said in my piece yesterday, what is Josh Hawley about? He's about never going back to Missouri. What is Elise Stefanik about? She's about not ending up on the city council in Plattsburgh.
Yes.
These are all people who like living in Washington, and they are never going home. And if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. And if that means eventually cutting loose just a couple of the nuts as ritual sacrifices, like they did with the Tea Party, where they, okay, we got to get the Not a Witch and Todd Aiken and, those guys. That could happen.
And more recently, Steve King.
Right. And in a district where they knew there wasn't much of a chance, that it was going to make that much of a difference, they took a risk. But in the end, even as a minority, I think Mitch can say, look, I am so good at jamming the gears that we can even govern as a minority party and get the things we want for the people who need to get those things from us that they need from us.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a real bad way to start off the.
No. I think that it's realistic, and I kind of want to go back into this. Who put out the 2 press releases that were the totally non?
Mitch, Nancy Mace.
Yeah.
And
Nancy Mace. Sorry.
Yeah, there's somebody else. I can't.
Sorry, I've been in I paid no attention to the news at all, more than usual of my not paying attention to the news, just because I was just super, super crunching on stuff, and so I missed that. But I want to kind of go back to that because it strikes me as something that I'm surprised we haven't commented on more, not just that instance, but I'm surprised it doesn't happen more, because it is so true that whatever the message is that wants to go to the base will get there. And then whatever the message is that you need for some type of deniability will get there. And so it is such a dark commentary on everything being about perception and the truth being about perception, and kind of the not just the misinformation, disinformation thing, because I would say that's even more passive, but this is such an active effort to control political speech in order to control a political brand in order to maintain power. And I just kind of think that that's actually the most, more than everything else. I was actually thinking, as you were talking about how powerful Lindsey Graham is and how he couldn't be taken down, I was kind of remember when we used to have scandals? I actually was thinking about this the other day. I was remember Ashley Madison and client number 9. I was thinking, what happened to that site? I was teaching internet law, and so I was kind of thinking about all of this stuff. And I was is there even besides the Anthony Weiner kind of stuff, which ended up in a dark place of kind of an incredibly dark place of
John Weaver.
Yeah, exactly. There's just is there anything even political, not
this is why I keep thinking
nothing matters, incitement to insurrection, this is crazy.
This is why I keep wondering about Lindsey Graham. What do you have to do to be so under the thumb of this bunch of dirtbags from Queens, that in this day and age it would still be something that could destroy you?
Yeah, and also that you could have this moment on January 7th where you say, I'm through with Trump, and you say it publicly, and then somebody yanks on your chain, or something yanks on your chain, and you're towing the line again.
Well, because I'm sure he got on the I shouldn't say I'm sure. This is my, again, I am extrapolating. He does that, gets on the phone.
Your commitment to truth, Tom. Silly.
And to just, that if I'm just making shit up, I have to say so. But I think that's when you do that, then you get on the phone and you immediately call and say, look, I had to do that, right? I love you. I still love you. Please don't ruin me. Because he gets on Air Force One the day after.
So why is the explanation not that people yelled at him in an airport, and if there's one thing that Lindsey Graham can't stand, it's being disliked on the right?
Because if he were facing an election next year, I would say, okay, fine. But it just doesn't. And again, does it make you better? Sorry, I'm conflating a couple of thoughts here. One is he's already won re-election. He's going to be a senator for as long as he wants to be a senator. That I think is just if he learned anything, it's that. The other is is he just so politically obtuse, and I don't think he is, that he actually believes that kissing up to Lara Trump gets you love on the right? That to me came across
she's not even blood.
That to me came across as a very personal appeal. Please don't ruin me. No, she's an in-law.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
So that was, to me, that came across as, please don't ruin me. I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, I'm still, because you don't need to do it. That's the thing, Ben. When you say he just doesn't like being hated on the right, fine. There are plenty of things you can do to shore that up. You don't need to go on a national forum and start tweeting out crazy shit about how Lara Trump of all people is the future of the party. There's something wrong there. That is a fear. That to me, as a grown man, reeked of panic and fear. Because I can't figure out any other reason to do it.
I did know that. I knew she wasn't. I'm sorry, I just was like kind of blanked out for a second. I kind of thought that maybe I've just seen her all over the news lately, and so I'm like, how is this? I don't know. I guess I thought that like maybe I missed a person or something. But yeah.
So I want to shift gears and talk about the Biden administration. Do you remember this guy, Joe Biden?
Yes, and the fact that we're not talking about him is a testimony to his political acumen.
Yeah, former presidential candidate, used to be a senator. How's he doing?
He seems to be he's been in office for a month, and he seems to be just getting up and going to work every day during a national public health crisis. So I'm going to say, so far, so good.
And as a conservative who supported him, you don't have any anxieties about the radical left agenda that he's pursuing? With all this spending and this deficit stuff and and socialism.
Well, and executive orders about trans people,
and also undoing really important national security measures like keeping Muslims out of the country. I mean, you're a conservative. What's how much stuff bothers you?
I said during the election that I was putting aside all my policy differences because there was no policy difference I had with anybody that was bigger than the attack on the Constitution.
Yeah, I understand that. But
okay.
But you
so
haven't
part
put
of me is saying
you haven't put aside policy views.
I know, but I'm not like, my hair isn't on fire here. If my camera's out of, I have one. There we go. My hair isn't on fire about this because I knew what I was getting when I voted for Joe Biden, and I knew that I would not love some of these executive orders. I have never been a movement conservative and a social hot button. I'm an old school. I worked for John Hines, for crying out loud. I was a national defense, national security, small government, low taxation conservative. So I do not excessively love some of the bits of meat that he has thrown to the left, but I also think that a lot of those things will get the stuff about trans people. I've said many times that's all going to get sorted out by the most powerful lobby in America, which is parents, down the line at some point. So do I love that stuff? No. Do I think that he's basically taking the right moves in the short term on things like COVID, on spending? Yeah, I mean, in fact, I was always against the federal mandate of a minimum wage. My wife and I were just talking about this today. My wife, I will keep her out of this because I don't represent the Naval War College, which I'm supposed to say, but I also don't represent my wife's views. But I will say that, my wife, a centrist, mostly Democratic, middle-aged lady from Massachusetts, saying things like, I was never really in favor of a mandated minimum wage, but now I think I am. And I said, as a conservative, I said, leave it to the states. But the one thing I've learned in the Trump era that liberals will say they learned during the civil rights era is you can't trust the states to do the right thing. And I think, I've kind of come around to that notion to say, okay, Biden's going to be a kind of a bigger government guy than normally I would have been comfortable with. But I think the states have shown that they are, these Republican parties running these states are not functional. I saw somebody in the chat kind of asking about mostly Democratic. She's from Massachusetts. She liked Romney Care. She thought Mitt Romney was an okay governor. She voted for Obama. She thought John McCain was a good man, but she voted for Obama. This is the centrist voter, the centrist unicorn that most parties want to get a hold of, who are, kind of thoughtful about politics, don't have strong party affiliations, and are willing to be convinced on a lot of things. So my reckoning of Joe Biden, so far he's not done anything that has been, shocking and awful and lurching to the left, because that's not Joe Biden. We're all, I don't know, I think I'm the oldest one of us here, but for God's sake, Joe Biden was a veteran member of Congress when I was working in the Senate 30 years ago. Joe Biden is not an unknown. It's not like, oh, what is this guy really about? When he showed up. It's just horseshit. It's always been that.
What's amazing to me is that you say that, and like, everyone in Lieu of Fun knows this already, but like my next door neighbor when I was living in Cape Cod, who I love dearly and who are very strong Trump supporters, well, they were, and they're not as much anymore. Their kids are in the military, etc. They're conservative. And I remember talking to her the day after the election, and they're your age. I don't know, Ben. I don't know how. They're like, no, they're much older. So like they're much older, but they were basically like, she had no idea that Joe Biden's wife had died in a car accident, and that like he'd been sworn into the Senate or that one of his sons had had served in the military. Had no idea any of that. Like, just literally, like, I talked to her the next day, and she, to her credit, was like, wow, I must be in the echo chamber too. Like, and was kind of like, wow. And I said it in a very nice way. I didn't talk down to her, but like, this is this interesting thing. Like, I'm like, this is so crazy how like one side claims another and then another's. It's so tribal. And this is well, I'm going to say, I think parties are doing us such a disservice right now, because they're just like muddying the tribes, and there's if we just cut off this weird QAnon arm, like it wouldn't survive.
I don't agree with that, Kate. I think, what's really striking is not just the people who didn't know about Joe Biden, but who seem to have developed amnesia. Like, it's not that they don't know about Joe Biden, it's that these are middle-aged people who now are saying, I never knew about Joe Biden. Like, I'm sorry, were you alive ever? He was vice president of the United States twice. And
that's a good point.
Maybe,
you can't maybe I'm giving them too much credit.
I wasn't politically active in 1990. Okay, but you were alive 5 years ago when he was the vice president of the United States. It's not like you were in cryo storage, in orbit somewhere. You knew this stuff. And what's really amazing to me is how people have let the tribal narrative replace their actual embedded memory to say,
that actually doesn't surprise me cognitively.
And some of it is the incompetence. I mean, I saw a young, I don't want to slag her on, television, but I saw a young, perfectly pleasant, reporter who said, it's during the debate, she said, it's really a shame that Trump was so, just filling the air in that first debate. She said, because there's still a lot of questions people want answered, and I think that they really want to get to know Joe Biden. And I'm like,
sorry.
Even if you're 25 years old, you've been living with Joe Biden your entire life. But it was almost this reflex of saying, we really needed this debate so that people could get to know Joe Biden. And I was like throwing things at the screen saying, you are part of the problem, because there is nobody who doesn't know who Joe, again, except for the most stubbornly apolitical and ignorant.
No, they're 70 years old. You're right. You're completely right. They should know who Joe Biden is.
They're 70 years old. It means they were 30 when, like 30-ish when Joe Biden was sworn in. He's been a senator most of their lives.
Yeah, I'm with Tom on this. I think the decision.
I'm decidedly very, very. I go too easy on people sometimes.
The decision not to know anything about Joe Biden is a decision. It's not an ambient lack of awareness. It's a decision that I choose to be ignorant rather than acknowledging that the opponent is a honorable person.
I simply, the and I hate to ever give him any oxygen, but it was a great moment in that Atlantic interview with Eric Metaxas, who is, I think, just like not. There's just something wrong with the guy, but when cornered about stuff, he'd say, "Well, I don't follow it as closely as you do, and I'm not really a." It's like, well, then why do you have a talk show? Why is anyone talking to you? I'm sorry, I don't follow. Oh, I'm the host of a political talk show, but I don't really follow these things. And that was a way of saying to the faithful, it's okay to be selectively stupid when it suits you.
Oh,
I mean, it's really funny. It's really amazing that a guy who's like
genuinely stupid all the time.
What's that?
Said it's different to be genuinely stupid all the time.
But they're not. I mean, like Ben said,
Yes.
it's a choice. It's a choice to say when somebody like Metaxas says, "Well, I don't really follow it that closely," that's just a lie. But that's a convenient lie to say. Reminds me.
It's a decision.
Well, because it also makes you look like you're punching down.
There's a bunch of things I choose not to know. I choose not to know about pop culture. Not because, just because I don't want to. It's just not what I'm interested in. And now I don't then go have a pop culture website, right?
Right. And that's the thing. When a guy like Metaxas says, "Well, I don't follow this. I'm a political talk show host, but I don't follow this crazy political stuff too closely." Well, that's what these are people who claim to be political junkies. These voters who have deep. This is what I was writing about in The Death of Expertise. It's not that they don't know; it's that they pretend not to know and have super strong opinions about it.
Yeah.
That's the part that's really worrisome.
Did anyone read the the Nicholas Kristof piece in the Times that was about his friend Mike dying, who was homeless, and kind of he goes through kind of all of the systems that failed him and like all of these different things. And it reminded me a lot of like talking yesterday with John, my partner, who was on the show just for Valentine's Day. He came on the show to talk, and John gets a hard time because he's a libertarian or he identifies as a libertarian. Whether he actually is one or not is up for consideration. But basically, I was thinking that Kristof goes through all of this kind of stuff, and he's like, I really care about the global poor and like this entire thing. And I was like, with you, think this is great. And then gets to this kind of takeaway, which is like, but we ruined this because we cared too much about capitalism and and killed unions. And then is saying that like his friend was not wanting to be like, was a person who was addicted to drugs, and granted like all of these mental health things failed him and all of these other things, but that there was basically kind of like, he was like, he also quotes like the ex-wife of this person saying like he didn't want to work, he didn't want to like do anything, he didn't really like working at all. And so I was like, did capitalism fail this guy? Is that what is the problem with this? Like, I was
looking around because I had the copy of the book up here, but if you've read Dying of Whiteness by Jonathan Metzl, sorry, I keep going.
I haven't read it.
Okay. Jonathan Metzl, who interviews a guy who's like basically saying he's dying of liver cancer and cirrhosis, and he says, well, I don't want Obamacare. He says, he says, my liver, years of hard partying. Okay, he says, but I don't want my tax money going to Obamacare. First things first, this guy's probably never paid taxes of any significance in his life, but he's basically saying, and if Obamacare means I get a liver, but some, black woman on welfare, some Mexican gets it, then I don't want, this is, I'm just going to put in a shameless plug for my next book. This is the moral failure that has made us bad at democracy. That this is not about economics. It's not about capitalism failing us. It's not about China offshoring our jobs. It is resentful, grievance-addled people who are being exploited by savvy political entrepreneurs.
Yes. And I completely agree with that. And I just I was thinking about how I was like, they were describing how in this small town that Nick Kristof grew up in, that like all of the factories had closed, and so this person didn't have a place to work. And I completely understand that. I think that there should be a social safety net. It's not that I think that shouldn't happen, but like, there are entire families that Nicholas Kristof has also written about in China and in other places that had jobs because factories opened there, because globalism like brought like all of this like industry to different places.
That's Steve Bannon's argument, right? He says, well, we destroyed the middle class in America by creating a middle class in China, except we didn't. Except we did. The problem.
It's the other way around. I thought you were saying that I was arguing Steve Bannon's argument. I was like,
Bannon would jump on your point by saying, yes, great, we created a middle class in Asia by destroying the one in America. The problem is that nobody wants to think about whether or not that middle class in America was dying off already because of culture rot that we don't ever want to talk about.
In China, because they're born in China, worth any more than people that are born?
Well, because you're supposed to take care of, because nationalism is a thing, Kate, and you're.
No, I mean, I know, I love it.
But
Ben is going to sign up today and tell me that I'm not a good American.
Well, as I keep saying to my fellow Americans, if you're that concerned about Chinese manufacturing, stop buying all the cheap shit made in China. You don't need 3 televisions. That's insofar as that's driving any of this, it is our addiction to a standard of living that would not be supportable if Americans had to make those goods.
Oh my God, it's so true.
All right, let's go to questions. I've been trying to bring Victoria Murphy on to ask hers, but I can't seem to get her on screen, so I'm going to read it. She says, please give us your 2 cents on the Lincoln Project, not so much the insider gossip, though we'd be happy to have that, but what can be salvaged going forward? Can the efforts of these folks still contribute to the pro-democracy effort, or are they permanently discredited?
I don't know. I left in part because I don't have any inside gossip. And when it got to the point where I knew as much as the public did, and, shoes kept dropping, I said, I need to just not, I'm not a founder. I don't have any skin in this. Let me just be upfront. I never took a dime. I was a volunteer advisor. And but I think the Weaver thing, I sort of, that broke in mid-January, and I said, okay, I'm willing to believe people that I've known for a long time saying we didn't know about this. We're going to look into it. We're going to hire lawyers. But then this kind of nuclear exchange between the founders that included, publishing Jennifer Horn's DMs and stuff. I just said, you know what? This isn't effective anymore, and it makes me, I think this is inappropriate and wrong, and it can't be associated with it. So I left. I think they did great work. I think they drew blood on Trump. I think they changed a lot of the atmosphere of the 2020 election in a way that people on the left especially don't want to give them credit for. Whether they can still be effective, I don't know, because part of what made the Lincoln Project effective was firing artillery from the moral high ground. And they've ceded a lot of that high ground now with this kind of, internecine, not just the John Weaver thing. I actually think the Weaver thing, a lot of organizations find out that they have a predator or a harasser in their midst. And if they do the right thing and they get the guy out and they put something out that says, we're making right to the victims, I think that's survivable. I don't know if that is what's going to happen. I think it's an open question still about who knew what when. For myself, I knew nothing. I've never met John Weaver other than virtually by work. But I think all of it started to just cascade into this, gigantic thunderdome among the people running it that that for those of us on the outside, we just had no transparency into. I worry that undermines their ability to be effective going forward, because their message was, look, we're a bunch of hard knuckle throwing pirate assholes, but we are not as bad as the Trumps.
Well,
which is not nothing.
Pirate throwing assholes on behalf of democracy.
On behalf of democracy. And we are not the kind of people that will stab each other in the back, and I just think that, this thing got out of control, could they return and do effective work? Absolutely. But I think, it's going to take reform and transparency and a report and an outside counsel and all the stuff that they are doing. In fairness, we're sitting here criticizing them. But if you talk to people like Chris Vance, who has stayed with them, and Stuart Stevens and others, they say, look, we are doing the things we need to do to become effective again. I just felt like I had nothing further I could do, and I was just too in the dark about what was going on. And I'm not comfortable in that situation. So I ended my association with them. But I wish them the best, and I thought they did great work, and I was glad to be a part of it.
Richard Wattenbarger, the floor is yours.
Hello. I got the half moon lighting tonight. So,
Can I? Somebody brought up the issue about the Lincoln, how the Lincoln Project spent its money. I have no vision into that because I was never part of that. But I'm just going to put it up front and say I don't care how they spent it, as long as they didn't break the law. I'm old school about this. If somebody gave them $1 million and said make a 30-second ad and keep the change, that's between them and their donors. I don't mind people getting rich off of being political consultants. If they were, throwing the money and buying Chinese weapon stocks or something, yeah, well, then somebody's. But again, that's the kind of thing an outside counsel can do. The money thing, I never asked about it because I wasn't involved in it and I wasn't getting paid. And I don't think you shouldn't get rich from being effective at something. So if they were getting rich, that didn't bother me.
Richard, the floor is yours.
Okay. So this question, it's phrased as a quantitative question, but you can just run with it however you want. The Trumpification of state party organizations has proceeded at a stunning pace. I know I was just shocked by these censure resolutions coming from multiple state organizations against Sass and Cheney and Cassidy and Burr. So I'm wondering how much of this has been driven by people who are relatively new to GOP politics, who've come in, say, since 2015, and how much has been driven by longtime Republicans who just decided to throw their lot in with Trump, even regardless of their prior convictions.
Whoops. Wait. Start again. You were on mute.
Oh, sorry. I don't think it's the case at all that these are people new to politics. I think these are, 2.5 years ago, I wrote a piece in the Washington Post that I really got pilloried from the right, arguing that you have to vote the GOP out down to the grassroots. And that's because the grassroots are more nuts than the national party. And that even the few rational Republicans out there, guys like Charlie Baker in Massachusetts, they don't control their state parties. They're Republicans by accident at this point. Larry Hogan cannot control the state party. And so I think these are, the party activists who are, again, grievance-laden, middle-aged folks who think that Trump was going to be the final payback for years of that black guy running the country and all the other stuff that was going on that they don't like, even though they are part of the culture that they claim to hate. And so I think that the radicalization of the state parties was really this sense that Donald Trump was the guy who helped them get rid of all the intermediaries between national power and these local party apparatchiks, and to say, Donald Trump is there to prove to us that you can own the libs without actually worrying about, winning elections or getting policy through or, really benefiting people. He made them feel good about being awful. And I would argue those state parties, if anything, were kept in check for years by having to support far more moderate candidates like Mitt Romney and John McCain than they were really comfortable doing. So I don't think I think the state parties are coming out of the closet and being exactly who they've wanted to be for a long time.
So Ben and I have been scheming in IMs, but oh my God, that was such a dated statement that I
You've got mail.
Sorry. I've been teaching internet law all day. Wow. We've been scheming in text message.
You guys were over on IRC talking?
Yes, we were like, yeah, that's exactly what was going on. Okay, so your sweatshirt gave me an idea, and then I messaged to Ben, and Ben was like, absolutely. And the idea was that we ask you 3 Jeopardy questions that we make up and see if you can guess the answers.
Okay.
So here's my first
Should I go get Carla for this?
Oh, yeah, please. Oh, go get Carla. my first question. I think it's really good.
I like your first question.
Did you know the answer?
No,
You didn't?
I did not.
I think that's a good sign.
But I knew the answer to both of the questions I wrote.
Yeah, I know you did because you wrote them. I did.
All right, so this is my lifeline. This is my call a friend lifeline.
Hi, Carla. Hi.
We even
my
have a
gosh.
questioner who says, "I'm just here for Carla."
Yeah,
I saw that.
literally, I think I like texted you or DM'd you to be like, hey, like, I'm like in need of Carla. Oh, gosh, she's a good girl. She likes under
Are you going to ask me like an Alex Trebek question? Can I take Litich now?
No, I think you're going to be able to handle it. I think
All right.
it's good. So the first question is, this beer is named for the family name of this conservative political leader.
Stroh?
No.
Conservative Sam Adams?
He was more of a
I mean,
radical.
maybe.
Yeah. A current beer named for a conservative political. Wow, this is. Somebody said Coors. Is that it?
Nope. Oh,
Then
it's
you-
in the chat though.
It's in the chat. Did it just go by? Bush?
Schlafly.
There's a beer named Schlafly?
Yeah.
See, I'm not a beer drinker.
Phyllis Schlafly runs an entire brewing.
Well, she doesn't run anything anymore, but
No,
okay.
she doesn't, but her family does. And so in St. Louis, you can get Schlafly beer.
I did not, as Johnny Carson would say, I did not know that.
Ooh, I'm so proud of myself.
All right, do question
That was
number
good.
2.
Okay, question number 2. This is, I mean, obviously these are like cherry picked for Ben and I's specific expertise. I interviewed Phyllis Schlafly at one point and wrote an entire treatise on the ERA. But this NATO member is a country Donald Trump didn't want to go to war over.
Latvia? He said it was one of the Baltic states, wasn't he?
No, it was Macedonia.
Macedonia. Oh.
Should we
But
go
we
to
didn't,
have a
but,
nuclear
the thing
war
is,
for
is,
Macedonia?
We didn't fact check these to see if there weren't other answers.
Well, when I actually got invited back on Jeopardy in a mistaken question, it was because there were multiple right answers.
Wow.
And I gave one, and they ruled me wrong.
No, see, so I'm actually super interested in that because I think it's the multiple right answers thing has always struck me as this weird loophole in Jeopardy that
Yes.
would be really nerve-wracking if you were a
I'm
writer
sorry.
for Jeopardy.
It wasn't Macedonia. It was Montenegro.
Oh, you wrote Macedonia in the chat.
I did write but I'm wrong.
And
Macedonia.
And I declare a misdeal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, last question.
Okay, last
All right.
question. This sitting senator is the first in American history to vote to remove a president of his party, and he did it twice.
Mitt Romney.
There you go.
Good.
All right, let's go to Alice Lee.
Hey, Alice.
Hi, how's it going?
Your
So my
apartment
question-
is so quiet now.
It's the external mic. That's all it is.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
God.
You know?
Glad it's that much of an upgrade. These were $7.
It's amazing what $7 will do.
Jesus.
Yeah. So my question is, because you said that the cutoff for ignorance was 25, I was hoping you could enlighten me. As we watch these protests in Russia, I was wondering what your take is, especially in light of the fall of the Soviet Union. I wonder if there are lessons you can draw from that, and if so, what are they?
Yeah, the lessons for American liberals is don't be like Russian liberals. Russian liberals have never been see, it's a pooch. Carla's already she's sitting here.
No, she
doesn't want any part of that. The Russians have spent 25 years. Russian liberals have spent 25 years fighting with each other and arguing and having all of these kind of spats internally about. Can you excuse me? God. And
They're
so
evasive.
they are just disorganized. I mean, there were plenty of opportunities even in the immediate post-Soviet period. And I still remember there was a great line by David Remnick, who wrote the best book on the fall of the Soviet Union called Lenin's Tomb. He said, Gaidar, who at that point was one of the members of he was prime minister, he said, campaigned as though he were trying to become head of the math department. And I thought, this is the lesson for modern Democrats. Pick a few big themes. Don't, Navalny, by the way, who we are all, praying for. I think it's important to remember, Navalny's a Russian nationalist. This guy is not like, a professor of Slavic studies at Swarthmore. Okay, this guy.
Although I think Swarthmore should give him a job if he wants.
Well, but he is a tough son of a bitch, and his policies. If he were president of Russia, there'd be plenty of his policies that Americans would kind of go, "Wow, we thought, friends here." But
whoops.
That is. Oops. Okay, we're picking up an echo. Russian liberals have made this mistake over and over again of internal purity fights and personality contests and bitching each other out, and Putin has been able to just roll over them. But I will just finish this by saying one of the things that I was much more sympathetic to the whole institution of Russian presidentialism in those first 10 years after the fall, because Russian social organizations could not create coherent parties in the parliament, because they were just they were just nitwits.
They also learned it from Lenin. I mean, the sort of endless fratricidal battles within parties has a pretty venerable tradition in 20th century Russian history.
I think the bigger problem, Ben, for the Russians was that because the communists had so effectively destroyed all the intermediate layers of society, in fairness to the Russian liberals, they didn't know how to create parties. They didn't know how to associate horizontally that way. But that didn't stop them from basically being, again, like campaigning like they were trying to win the math department. I mean, it was really a problem. So,
John Bordeaux,
hey, John.
The floor is yours.
Hey, John.
Oh, I don't think you're. Do you have earphones? I don't think you're.
We can't hear you.
Can't hear you. We can hear ourselves.
All right, I will read John's question.
Okay.
Bummer.
John asks, where did John's question go?
Why am I face so big? Sorry, I got too close to the camera.
Where did John's question go? Oh, I must have dismissed it on the theory that... there it is. What do you make of, or what do you know about, the talks regarding a third party for rump Republicans and the viability of such an enterprise?
I know nothing about it. I was in that meeting, actually. I was there, and it's Chatham House rules, so I cannot characterize too much of it. I will say that there is the Reuters report on it made it sound much more like there was just a coalition for a third party than there really was. There were a lot of us who were saying, third parties, structural impediments. I personally, I won't characterize what others said. I will simply say that I argued for being in a coalition with the Democrats as unhomed conservatives or center-right or centrists. Let the Democratic coalition become like a big unstable nucleus that will eventually fission and create two other atoms down the line. But trying to set up a separate third party, I want that to happen with Trump leading it so that it drains off votes from the Republicans. I don't want the pro-democracy forces to do it and drain off votes from the democracy movement.
Yeah, why isn't the right approach, since Trump seems bent on destroying the Republican Party,
to just let him,
and then pick up the pieces? He'll lead some group out of it, and they can form the Patriot Party, and then which will flame out like all third parties do, and then there'll be the apparatus of the Republican Party to pick up.
The short answer is because we have all become so insanely tribal that the notion of enlarging our own coalitions and not getting 100% of what we want is completely alien to us. This is the same argument I just had on Twitter before I came here tonight of, this Gallup poll showing how kind of fractured people think of themselves, that Democrats are like 35% conservative, but 25% liberal, and so on. And I said, go for a big coalition. No more purity tests. Democracy is the only purity test. Democracy, constitutionalism, the rule of law. We can argue about abortion and guns and,
it's like literally maybe the only two issues. Like, I feel like they're the only two.
Well, but that's because the Republicans.
Issues.
That's because the Republicans want them to be the only two issues because they know how effective they are at being divisive. But the same problem happens with the pro-democracy conservatives that, when guys like me say, we should just be in an alliance with the Democrats. And it's like, am I really?
Socialism.
And trans people and, it's like, look, you're not going to get everything you want. Nobody's going to transform the United States overnight. That we told ourselves that about Obama 10 years ago. He's going to transform America. Form coalitions, make the center a place to be, but nobody wants to do it. The Democrats don't want to do, well, some Democrat, Joe Biden wants to do it, clearly, but people on the far left of the Democratic Party and even reasonable Republicans, I think they still have this kind of gut clenching about, we could support Biden and we had to get through this crisis.
What's clenching the gut?
Well, anything south of the sternum is pretty much clenching, and I just think we have to get over that and to say we're not going to, we can't.
I mean, I think this point is so obviously right. Look, the next 4 years, the next few years are going to be built around 3 or 4 basic premises that reasonable conservatives and reasonable liberals do not argue about. 1, massive spending to get out of the coronavirus crisis and to support people while we do. 2, effective administration of the crisis, which in fact has no partisan valence at all. Or at least it shouldn't. It does only because Republicans decided not to believe in it. 3, pro-democracy reforms of one sort or another, voting capabilities, and number 4, some reasonable efforts at accountability and national reconciliation.
I would add to that the rule of law.
Yeah,
which is accountability.
I was grouping that under the pro-democracy's reforms and accountability, but sure.
I wish we would stop saying the rule of law and would start just saying accountability.
But look,
the rule of law is actually a canard for like accountability.
Consequences. Serious
consequences.
Yes. But also reform. Right?
Yes.
So if you take those 4 big themes or 5 big, however you want to group them out, there's like lots of little slicey policy arguments that reasonable people can have, but there's no great ideological valence to these things. And if you take David French on the right and Kristen Clark, who's, if the Republicans will ever consider Justice Department nominations, is going to run the Civil Rights Division, they'll agree about, on the left, they'll agree about 75-80% of it, right? This is something that we should all be able to,
But the problem is that we're getting baited, primarily by the right. But again, there's some blame. I'm just not going to let people on the left off the hook about this, but we're getting baited into stupid policy arguments about, again, so Tom, you're in favor of, again, socialism. Tom, you voted for Biden, so you must be happy about transgender, so you must be hoping to see 6'7" bearded guys beating 4th grade girls. It's the trick is to not take that bait and to say, I am not going to get everything I want. I will fight you on some things later, but right now it's about the Constitution and the rule of law and making sure this doesn't happen again. And
that's exactly right.
It's totally right.
But it's so easy to just stick that hot wire in there. And I think, this is where I'm going to say, Joe Biden, he didn't need to be issuing that executive order in his first week. It was an easy catch. A friend of mine pointed out that she's visiting her mom, and she said her phone dings every 5 minutes with an alert from Fox News. Stop giving them material. Stop, and I also think that, and the call to my friends on the right is stop apologizing to people on our right for saying, yeah, I know they're Democrat. No, simply say, look, your continued refusal to work with a pro-democratic coalition is shameful.
Yeah.
Ducks with pants.
Absolutely.
The floor is yours.
Well, speaking about the Constitution, accountability, and the rule of law, impeachment seems a little broken. Perhaps the founders did not anticipate that
When has
a rising
impeachment ever worked out for us? Like,
yeah,
sorry, not to like. I mean, it's like you say broken, but that like implies that it was like a system that
our history
worked.
to date with the process of impeachment has not been particularly successful. In particular, in this most recent case, where it seems, or recent two cases perhaps, where the rising demagogue's popularity has led to essentially jury nullification. Now, whether or not this was a flaw in the original design or a subsequent problems with our tinkering with popular election of senators and so forth, this is something we can fix. I mean, constitutional amendment or whatever.
The founders did not anticipate a country full of unvirtuous people.
Oh my God, Jeffrey Rosen, if he was here right now, would like plus. You're
And they did not anticipate. They did not anticipate the systematic elevation of partisan position over institutional prerogative,
which is part of being unvirtuous, which is just an unvirtuous, uncivic. I mean, I just, you guys saw, right? I delivered this book manuscript last week because we all know how that feels because it sits on your shoulder like a monkey, But part of the reason I was blocked on this for a while is I really wanted to take seriously the argument that it is some larger issue and not a collapse of public virtue. I really tried to argue hard with myself about that. And the fact is, we are basically an unvirtuous people. We are not a serious people. And that's why I'm going to answer another question that just came by in the chat, because it's one I get all the time. It was Matt, somebody who said, why should we not do the things we're going to do? Because they're going to criticize us anyway. I'm sorry, I don't know you. I don't mean to be insulting, but that's how children think. Ooh, they're going to be mad at us anyway, so let's, they're going to say we burned down the shed, so let's burn it down anyway. No. Grown-ups accept that politics is a serious business. You don't give your opponents ammunition. You try to find the reasonable people that you can peel off. You create coalitions, and you don't. Can I drop an F-bomb in here?
Of course.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Don't fucking whine all day long about how life isn't fair, and they're going to say mean things about us. You have to be serious. You have to approach this with the utmost seriousness of saying, there are things that I have to do that I'm not going to like, that are going to build coalitions. And one of the things the Democrats, like the Russian liberals, by the way, did not understand is that if you win enough elections in a sustained momentum and maintain a majority, you can start passing things that are not done by the skin of your teeth. You can't keep approaching this like one final parliamentary election and then I can extinguish my opponents. You have to win successive elections and build coalitions. The Republicans, until Trump, the Republicans excelled at this. I know people say, well, the Republicans won because they cheated and they gerrymandered and they're mean. I was alive in 1980. I voted in that election. Reagan's basic approach was, if you're not against us, you're with us. If you don't hate us, then there's a place that is with us. And that's how you win 49 states in 1984. That has gone. And so stop bitching about how much the Republicans are going to say bad things about you. Be the adults in this relationship. I'm sorry it's unfair to the centrists and the people on the left that we are going to have to be the stoics and the adults and the responsible ones, but that's how it gets done. And if that doesn't happen, then we are going to go the way of the Russian liberals.
I'm going to say
That
this
was
to
my
lighten the
only
moment,
F-bomb of
but
the day.
I'm just going to say that, like, Reagan apparently loved jelly beans. So, like,
He did love
apparently
jelly beans.
such, like, which seems a little, I don't know, like, ingenue, like, kind of, like, cute and like childlike to me.
Hey, I
But-
like Swedish fish, and I consider myself a serious man. So
Yeah, right. Well, I think that's the thing is you can
listen to that.
distinguish
Well,
yourself.
yeah, well,
Well,
right.
hang on, both of you. We got 3 more questions. We've got
All
0
right.
more minutes. We're going to get
Okay.
through the
Sorry,
questions.
we're
Quick
like on-
questions, quick answers. David
Lightning
Botts,
round.
the floor is yours,
Oh my gosh, what is this beast of the day?
and you've got 2 beasts of the day, and
A
Herman
narwhal
Munster,
and wow.
and the hedge
Very
trimmer
nice.
fish. Yeah. The hedge trimmer fish, by the way, I want you all to know this, is near extinction in many places because of its propensity to get the saw caught in fishing nets. So keep your fishing nets away from the frickin' hedge trimmer fish, okay? David
Like,
Botts.
seems like a very Darwinian kind of like let's not be like I mean that's a cool looking fish but also like
I'm sorry,
isn't it-
I have a chainsaw that looks just like that. It's really useful. But if you dangle fishing nets in my face when I'm trying to use my chainsaw,
You'll cut
it's going to
through the
cause an
fishing nets.
accident.
no
You
you're
know,
gonna cut
it-
through the okay whatever.
All right, David Botts.
Agree to disagree.
Well, thanks, Mr. Nichols. Thanks for appearing. What are the foreign policy considerations for the support of small d democracy following both the January 6th insurrection and the subsequent acquittal of the previous president? What does that mean to us when we try and support that?
It's just hugely damaging. And the only thing, I loved giving lectures to my Russian friends about American constitutionalism because we did not have a scar like this on the face of our society since the Civil War. And I would say, okay, they'd say, a u vas lynchuют негров, which, in Russian means, oh, and it's the great Russian whataboutism. Yeah, but you lynch Negroes. They used to say back in the 60s. Okay, fine. We don't do that anymore. Now they can say, oh, but you have insurrections and people smear shit on the walls of your capital. At least we don't have that happen in Russia. It's going to be hard to get around that. And I think a big part of it is how we deal with it ourselves. If some of these people go to jail and we really do investigate, is there a problem in the military? Is there a problem in law enforcement? Where in society is this coming from? How do people get it into their heads that they can go and invade the Capitol and then get a day pass to go to Mexico? I think if we handle that, we'll have a better, we can then turn and say, look, just like we had riots in 1968, we had a president resign in 1974, we take these hits, like John F. Kennedy says, and we put them right in the window for everybody to see. But yeah, it makes it harder.
Tony Cava, the floor is yours.
That's Momo.
Momo.
Hi Momo. Hi Momo.
We can't hear you, Tony.
Momo, can you guys hear me now?
Oh yeah, can't hear you.
Barely, shout.
Barely.
Oh, hey, we're having technical difficulties.
That's all right. We can.
Hey,
Yeah, I can't hear him at all.
Question, a quick, not so serious question. Everyone wants to hear. Serious question is, it seems to me that people like Sass, etc., actually did stick their heads out to vote for witnesses on Saturday, and then it kind of strikes me that Schumer kind of pulled the rug out from under them. Normally, that's a
I
big
didn't hear that. at
Yeah,
all.
he's asking about witnesses.
Okay.
Biden and Schumer actually depend on support from Sass and et cetera going forward. And
Can
Okay.
Biden depend on Sass going forward
So
now
the-
that they've voted
the-
for witnesses?
Yeah, the question was a bunch of Republicans stuck their neck out on witnesses, and the Democrats kind of pulled the rug out from under them and traded it away. Can they count on support from those Republicans going forward at following that?
One thing I'll say, I took a lot of shit on Twitter because I thought it was stupid to ask for witnesses, get it, and then back off from it. If you didn't want them, you shouldn't have gone there. As Napoleon said, if you're going to take Vienna, take it. And they didn't. Now, but I don't really think that matters a lot. I think, again, if you're trying to explain Sass and the rest of them, maybe Bill Cassidy, maybe there was an element of, I'm told Sass cares about this stuff, wanted to get, who knows? But I also think I'm not going to give huge props to people who are clearly doing something in their self-interest. And if they want to continue to reap the benefit of having done the right thing, then my answer to them is keep doing the right thing. don't say, well, I supported you once and you screwed this up, and now I have a get out of jail free card to go back to being a Trump supporting Republican. I think it was what the Democrats did that on Saturday was remarkably incompetent, which is what I kind of expect from the Democratic Party most of the time. But I don't think that lets them off the hook, and I think they will probably be more bipartisan now that they because that's who they are. I think a lot of that is just I don't draw as close a relationship between those two things as maybe Momo's dad does. So.
Fubar, you get the last question today.
Hi. Yeah. So I have two questions for Tom. One, I'd like to hear you talk about like the link between conservatives and like the obsession with tax cuts for the rich. I mean, is this a Reagan era thing, or did this exist before that? Like conservatives always claim to be acting for the little guy, but then the policies don't just their policies seem to benefit the big guys. The other thing I wanted to ask was, do you think the Republican Party has now become the party of anti-intellectuals, or is it certainly the party that is attracting the anti-intellectuals?
Yeah, there's two separate
questions, but not I love that.
The first one, the people, and I saw a bunch of Reagan hatred flow by over in the chat. Look, let me say this: if you, as a Democrat, do not understand how Reagan was popular in 1988 and managed to get his vice president elected for his third term, if you cannot get your head around how that happened, you're going to keep losing elections. And you say, well, Reagan's tax cuts benefited the rich. They did. On the other hand, the people who lived through the 1980s will now tell you those were pretty good times. Like when I have a friend who voted for Trump, who had also voted for Obama, had also voted for Bill Clinton, voted for Bush, 43. And I said, he said, look, I don't like any of them. Nothing's been good since Reagan. Nothing's been good since the 80s, because he remembers the 80s.
Sorry.
The problem is that you cannot defeat a lot of kind of learned behavior about the 1980s were simply not as bad as people will tell you to remember them as. So relitigating Reagan is a stupid position for Democrats to take. It's like the Republicans who tried to relitigate FDR. FDR was really a socialist, and he screwed up World War II, and he gave us away the store at Yalta. You know what? Nobody cared about that. And Republicans figured out that relitigating FDR was stupid. It wasn't going to go anywhere. So just drop that and let it go. The second part about is it the party of anti-intellectualism is absolutely true. And I will make one throwback to Reagan here. When people say, well, that began with Reagan. I don't know who people think they were thinking of back then, but the Reagan who had Harvard professors and Ivy Leaguers throughout his entire administration, George Shultz. We just lionized George Shultz. Ronald Reagan's the guy who hired him from the University of Chicago. Something happened that I think has more to do, and I think David Shore has been a really smart voice on this, the data guy, of saying the parties themselves have become captured by people who are more college educated. And what the Republicans have done is hide that better, because they understand that for kind of a big lumpen proletariat out there, that's a red flag. The Democrats are running with it, saying, we're the party of college education. Okay.
The Republicans,
that's a loser of an issue.
Josh Hawley does not advertise his Yale Law School background.
And hey, neither did Bill Clinton. Right? Bill Clinton, Rhodes Scholar.
But this is such an interesting thing. We're going to have John McWhorter on to talk about linguistics soon, but this is such an interesting point. His down home accent sold him. The believability was there. Right? Don't you?
With whom?
I'm looking in the chat. People are saying, no, the 1980s were correct. Stop relitigating 40 years ago. You're not going to win this argument with most people in America of either party. It's just stupid. It's stupid. I don't mean that you're stupid for thinking that. I mean, it's stupid politics to keep saying this. It's like I said, trust me that there were Republicans in the 80s. I was with them. I was in the rooms when they said, you know what we ought to do? We should roll back the socialist legacy of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Nobody wanted to hear that. My father became a rabid kind of, right-wing bigoted old man, and yet you could not say a word about FDR in front of my father.
That's so interesting.
He was a hero to my father. He saved the country.
People had more nuance to kind of the history of these things and how they change over time and how we come to believe about them as in party or out of party, or like lionizing our beliefs or not. But like, so like a great like, Brown and Roe, which are two decisions I believe strongly in, but do not like. And there's not a law professor that I know that teaches those decisions as these are not moments of kind of judicial active. Like, I don't know, they'd say judicial activism because that's a term of the right, but like that are not moments of kind of the law stepping outside itself and deciding to prioritize certain types of norms that have developed in space and update the Constitution accordingly. And like, I think that's like, you have to have that conversation. That if
and I think one thing to understand, one big difference between the Republicans of then and the Republicans of now, the Republicans of then, of 1980, even going into 1990, it was a very confident conservatism. You didn't have people running up and down the street saying, "Let me tell you why I feel the need to vote for George H.W. Bush." They just did. They just said, "You know what? The country's better off that way. We don't need to have, we're not proselytizing about it." The Republican Party of now is deeply insecure because they know they're a dwindling demographic minority, and they know they can't sell their ideas because their ideas are no longer optimistic, confident, inclusive. Even when Reagan was pushing tax cuts for the rich, how did he push it? We're all going to get rich. It's going to be better for all of you. This is going to help your town. Reagan, by the way,
but Trump's $22 million loophole for taxes to heirs, if you like bequeath them $22 million, like that's going to make all of us.
And how did he sell that? He goes out and says, "I know this isn't going to help you, but I own the libs and I pissed them off by doing it." That's basically, and the Republicans have given up on any positive message. It's all about, if you vote for Democrats, socialist drag queen abortionists are going to come and take your house. And that, getting baited into that argument over and over again is just pointless. And I think trying to create a new conservative party in the face of that is, to go back to the point about that third party, I think it's just fruitless.
We are going to leave it there. Tom Nichols, thanks for joining us. You have, this could almost have been the start of Pugilism Week.
We didn't fight. I feel like we just had this really great
now he fought
repartee.
with the chat, though.
Yeah, I fought with some of the people. And by the way, someone in the chat made a good point. Said, "Well, this is just the chat. We're not the DNC." No, but you know what? If you're going to be, and this is something, let me offer one parting lesson from a former Republican. If you're going to advocate for your party and your position, be a confident and stoic advocate of your party. This is what a lot of people did in the 1980s. And one of the reasons there was a brewing split in the Republicans after Gingrich was a split between the old school Republicans and what they saw as a bunch of howling drama queens coming in. And that's, to me, the real kind of meltdown of the Republican Party. You can trace that family fight depending on where you were in 1994, 95. But don't.
I was in fourth grade.
Well, okay, for those of us, for older folks, or how you feel about it in retrospect. I mean, I am proud to say that I was an early adopter of hating Newt Gingrich right then. I was 33 years old.
I didn't like him because his name was Newt, but that was about as sophisticated.
But, I mean, he's just, but the Republicans. The way the Democrats are going to win this and get through, and I think this is for the pro-democracy movement in general, is to be the serious, responsible, stoic, steady, stable advocates instead of getting into these crazy drama queen pissing matches with people on Fox and OAN and all of that stuff. I think the other thing is, remember, there are some people out there whose views are simply beneath contempt and comment.
I am totally with you on this, Tom, as long as you don't tell me I can't troll Rick Grinnell on Twitter.
Oh, no.
That is a pleasure I will not give up.
No, there are exceptions that God himself would make.
Yes, I think Rick Grinnell, who Scott Shapiro and I have taken to seeing if we can bait into.
Oh God, you two are terrible.
It is
Anyway.
it is a fabulous, refined.
It
You know,
feels a
it's-
little schoolyard. It feels
Oh,
like
it's-
actually like two people, like in a like two like. Anyways, I almost like don't like it because I'm like, oh, I know what's going on, and this is so bad. But yes, it's
Look,
excellent.
punching down is wrong, but it feels really good.
I was also going to say punching down is wrong, but look, he was the Senate
Who wants
confirmed
to be
ambassador
right?
to Germany
Yeah.
and the acting DNI, and I think I am just some guy.
If,
You know?
if trolling Rick Grenell is wrong, who wants to be right?
Yes,
We're going to leave it
exactly.
there. Tom Nichols, you're a great American. Thanks so much for joining us today. We will be back tomorrow, 22 hours and 45 minutes from now. We haven't figured out yet who our guest is, but we will between now and then. And until then, we don't have fun anymore, but we still get to punch down at Senate confirmed officials. See you tomorrow, folks.
Excellent.